My name is Lauren Roberts, and I'm the Director of Agency Consulting here with Kite Technology Group. Today, I want to share with you a few tips and tricks on how to better utilize security groups within your agency. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen with you and go through some of the key areas that you'll want to address when reviewing and or updating your security groups in Epic. So we'll need to go into Configure over on the left-hand side of your screen, and you might notice that I am using the browser version of Applied Epic today. So things might look a teeny bit different, but everything's basically the same as far as the functionality and configuration is concerned. So over on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll go into Security, and you want to go into Security Groups. Now that's where we're going to go to actually configure and set up and review our security groups. But why use security groups? What's the real purpose behind using a security group versus just going and changing Bob or Susie or whoever's user rights specifically? So the challenge we have with a specific user change as far as security is concerned is that it can become really hard to track that information down and figure out what specific users have access to. I can't tell you how many times I've had a conversation with someone about a user and they've said, yeah, well, we just gave that person that access because they needed to be able to do X. Well, did you give them that access, or did you give them that access and some more access? So without having a security group set up with that structure built around it, we have to go into each specific user and find out what they have access to. So you'd have to go to this person specifically. We'll call them a person, but it is our tier 1 login. And you'd have to go into program access and search through several different areas. You would also have to search through the sub areas of those areas that they could have access to. So when you're looking at something like configure, for example, you've got all of these different areas, and each of these areas have different areas that they can either view or take action on within that. So it can be very challenging to find a needle in the haystack, so to speak, to find out what your users have or have not gotten access to. So over on the left-hand side of our screen, we're going to go back into the security group. So that's going to show you kind of what a challenge it could be to go track that information down. So we're going to go over to our security groups and dig into those a little bit deeper. Now, you'll see here that we have some pretty standard security groups in this database. These are pretty basic, coming from Applied Epic out of the box. I haven't added any additional groups at this time. So your servicing group is normally a good starting point for any of your CSRs or servicing staff to use. You may also want to include producers in that servicing group if they are going to be accessing and adding, editing, or taking any action in Epic on the client account. You don't necessarily have to put them in the producers group because typically that's a little bit more restrictive. Then you could have other groups that might be for folks in your accounting department, human resources, maybe even benefits, just depending on what their needs are as far as accessibility and what actions they need to have access to in your Epic database. So a couple of other things to know about a security group is that you don't have to have a security group that has all of the access a person needs in that group. So what I mean by that is I could have this tier 1, for example, set up in a servicing group, but maybe tier 1 is really good at download and I want to pass that responsibility on to them. So if I wanted to do that, I don't have to go into servicing and create the ability for them to access download. We don't want to do that because we don't want that whole group to have download. We don't need to go to the user and do that. All we have to do is create a group with just the additional access to download. They're going to inherit whatever rights they have in the servicing group and then have the additional rights that you've added in the download group. So I don't have to add everything they have in servicing to the download group. I just need to add them to the download group. So that might look like something along the lines of adding something that says download specifically. You want to be as descriptive as possible here so that you remember, what did I do with this group? What's the detail of this group? When you click on add, you can add in members as needed, and then you would go over to the program access. Now, this is where we don't have to put everything in that's already in the servicing group because they're already in the servicing group. All we'll have to do here is go over to the specific area they're going to need access to. So I might click on procedures, for example, select interface management, and from there, you can either grant all by using the little quick hyperlink over on the right-hand side, or you can select just certain areas of the specific sub areas permissions. Now, you do want to make sure you review each one of these areas and make sure you're not giving too much access into certain things. But you definitely want to make sure that your user has the access they need in order to process the job that you have given them. Sometimes this takes a little bit of trial and error, so don't despair if you create another group and you add the rights you think they need, but then they still can't access what they need. Sometimes there's a little bit of a crossover for certain areas. So you might have added something in interface, but maybe they also needed something in reports to make sure that a comm log works and things like that. So if you have any challenges with making sure that users have those security rights they need, you can certainly feel free to reach out to Applied or your favorite Kite consultants. We'd be happy to help you work through that. But certainly get some guidance if you're struggling on finding out what access you actually need to give them to perform a specific job that's needed. So for today, I'm just going to click on Grant All just to show you an example of what that's going to look like. So notice I didn't go to any other area of the security group. I just targeted that procedures and interface management because for now, that's what I want this additional user to have access to. So now I have them over in the tier 1 that gives them the additional security access, and they're over here in the servicing group because they already were in the servicing group and have access to do everything a CSR would be. Some other ideas for you here as far as groups are concerned might be an admin light. That's a pretty popular security group. You can make that, of course, whatever you want, but you might go to several areas within Epic and grant access to lots of things, but maybe you don't want that person to have access to bank accounts. So then you would, of course, not give them access to any bank accounts. Maybe you have a benefits person within your agency or a benefits department. That's something that you're going to need to create an account or in a group for so that you can give them access to certain HIPAA documents, HIPAA flagged notes, and things like that. So definitely utilize your security groups to provide some structure around the access that your users have in your Epic database. Now, you might be wondering, why would we have an admin light, or why would we need an accounting or human resources group when we have an enterprise admin access? Now, you can look over at your logins to see who your enterprise users are. Over here, you'll see that there is a radio button for enterprise. If they are just a user, they're only going to have the ability to access anything in their user group, or don't do it, but or anything that they have been given access to in their user login, as we looked at earlier. So make sure they're in a group if they need to be a user. So the big difference here between the enterprise access and a security group is that you can limit some of the things that a user would have access to by putting them in a security group, versus with an enterprise access, they have access to everything in your entire database. They can take any action, access any information, and really just have the keys to the kingdom as far as accessing information in your database is concerned. So often users kind of want to separate some of those things out. And so they'll create something like an admin light or human resources or accounting to limit visibility into other, maybe a little bit more security sensitive areas. Okay. So something else to keep in mind here, I know this isn't security groups necessarily, but when you are adding new users into your Epic database, we also recommend checking out the user options. Specifically for something like a benefits employee, you may want to come down here into their field defaults in user options and make sure that they are saving things in the security access that is HIPAA. You may also want to make sure that they are adding notes that are only HIPAA accessible. So if you want to lock that down, might be something to add to your list as you're adding those new users in the system. What this does is this just defaults their attachments and their activity notes to HIPAA secure, so other users won't be able to access those unless you've added that to the group. Okay. So hopefully you've learned a little bit more today about how to properly use your security groups in Epic. Don't be looking for a needle in a haystack. Always make sure that you look at your security groups, see what access your users have there. And some other things to keep in mind are that you do have access to an on-demand report in the security group. So if you click on demand, you can see the full detail of what the access is for a specific security group. And always utilize your help file as well. There's a lot of great information in your Epic help file on what those specific areas and sub areas are actually giving access to, and even how some of those areas bleed over into each other. So on demand and help file are also your friends. And don't forget to reach out to Applied Support or Kite Technology if you have additional questions on setting up your security groups. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.